بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا ومولانا محمد الصادق الأمين وعلى آله وصحبه ومن استنى بسنته إلى يوم الدين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. This is lesson 12, I believe. Is it 12?
Yes.
Khair. Alhamdulillah. Okay, so in our last lesson, we were talking about the conversation of the brothers of Yusuf, alayhi salam, in the initial plotting, where they suggested two possible options. Option number one was to outright murder him. And option number two was to exile him to some far away land, so far that he would never be seen again. And the intention is so that they would receive the care, love, and concern of their father that they were jealous of, since Yusuf was receiving it more than they were. And we are now in ayah number 10, and today we're going to look at the plot and how they tried to convince their father Yaqub to allow them to go out to carry out this plot. And we'll see a bit about the nature of children and human nature and instinct and things like this, inshallah. So we begin with the 10th ayah of this chapter, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, قَالَ قَائِلٌ مِّنْهُمْ لَا تَقْتُلُوا يُوسُفَ وَأَلْقُوهُ فِي غَيَابَةِ الْجُبِّ يَلْتَقِطُهُ بَعْضُ السَّيَّارَةِ إِن كُنتُمْ فَاعِلِينَ. One from amongst them said, "Do not kill Yusuf, but throw him into the depths of the well. Some travelers will find him if you're going to do it." There's a lot of meaning here, and we see here that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not identify who among the brothers said this. He does not say قال شمعون or قال لاوي or قال يهوذا. He doesn't name the brother who says this. He says قال قائل منهم, said a sayer from among them. That's how it sounds in Arabic. It's very ambiguous. So the two options were mentioned in the verse previous: kill him or exile him. And here one of them says, no, don't kill him. And then he gives an idea for how to carry out the second suggestion mentioned by the brothers, which is to exile him. How can we exile him? And he suggests putting him into this ghayabat al-jub, the inner depths or recesses of the well, not a well, the well. So first, before we go into the details of the well and whatnot, let's ask, who was this person? Among the brothers, who was the one who said, don't kill him, but put him in the well? Someone has their hand up. Yes? Reuben. Okay, so some say it's Reuben. And you'll find in the books of Tafsir different narrations and different opinions about the identity of the one who said this. Some say it is Judah, Yehuda. Some say it's Reuben, Rubil. Some say it's Simon, Sham'un. And some say, and some say, and some say. Usually it's the nature of the books of Tafsir that when it comes to these kind of details, you'll find an opinion. If there's 11 brothers plotting, you'll find 15 opinions about who one of the 11 brothers is. It's like Laylatul Qadr. Laylatul Qadr, the night in which it occurs, there are more opinions about Laylatul Qadr than there are nights in a month. And that's just the nature of these types of discussions. There is a narration from Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu in which it is said, or it's reported that he said the brother who said this was Yahuda or Judah. And it said that it's the oldest brother saying this, the oldest brother. And he was reluctant, and they have a Quranic proof to substantiate this. They say that it was the eldest brother, because we see later on in the story that the eldest brother was reluctant to go with Binyamin, have Binyamin go to Egypt. And they link that hesitancy with the ambiguous statement here and say that the one who was hesitant later in the story was the one who said this. So there's a certain care and a certain hesitancy to go along with the plot to murder him. And so he suggests what is seen as the lesser of two evils. However, we don't really know the identity of this person. The narration of Ibn Abbas is questionable, and there's no certainty as to the identity. And this is why some of the ulama say that there's a reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not mention the identity. And there's two reasons mentioned. Number one, it's not that important for us. It doesn't really matter one way or the other if it was Reuben or Simon or Levi or Judah or whoever. It doesn't impact the story. If anything, it takes away from the focus of the story itself, which is what's going on with Yusuf. The second reason, some ulama say, that the identity wasn't mentioned is because they later apologized. They later made up and sought forgiveness. And by concealing the identity, it is preserving their honor by not specifying who it was. This is in order to give the reader a husn al-dhann, a beautiful opinion of all of them, given the outcome at the end of the story. If you identify it was this one in particular, and you get to the end of the story, they all apologize, they seek forgiveness, but you're at the end of the story, you're still thinking, well, this is the guy who started it all. He's the one who put the idea to the other brothers. If he didn't do it, maybe they would have given up. So we don't know who it was, and it's not important, and that's our conclusion. So the biblical narratives would say Reuben or whoever. It's not important to us, and we don't have any certainty to say whether it was this one or that one. Now, looking at the ayah itself, this sayer among them says that instead of killing him, they should place him in the inner depths of the well. And he's saying this, giving them the second option, trying to avoid the greater sin of murder, and he tells them to place him in the ghayabat al-jub. The word here, ghayaba, comes from the word ghaib. What does ghaib mean? It means something that is unseen. What is the ghayabat al-jub? It means the inner depths of the well. And we don't really have any interactions with drawing water from wells or living around wells anymore. Most of us don't. But if you have lived in a very rural area where you depend on well water for yourself and for your crops and animals, you'll note that there are different kinds of wells. Some wells are very basic and primitive. They're dug into the ground and they go at a certain depth, and at the bottom it clears out. It goes inwards like a niche, like a lahad of sorts, and the water wells up from there and it's collected in a very rudimentary, primitive way. Other wells are more structured, where not only is the well dug very deeply, it's wide, and at the surface there's a structure around it, and it may even have a covering that goes over it, because if it's very abundant, it prevents the water from flowing out and flooding the area. So there's different kinds of wells, and these differences are conveyed in the Arabic. The word jub in Arabic is for a very primitive, basic well. The word bi'r in Arabic is for the more structured well that has something built around it. In living in Mauritania, I had encountered both. You'd have the structured well that's built, dug very deeply into the ground, and a wall of sorts is built around it to protect people, animals, children, as well as to enable the cover to be placed on top of it, and for this overarching structure to be built for drawing the water. The bi'r, on the other hand, I also encountered living there, and that's in the middle of nowhere. So when looking at these two words, bi'r and jub, the bi'r will be in a more populated area where there's more people, where there's children, where there's animals. But a jub will more likely be in a rural area far away from human beings. Most likely it will be located on a path, on an area where people are traveling and they stop to get water. It's not used that often. But note here that when they describe it, they don't say, the brother doesn't say, let's put him in the inner depths of a well. He says, let us put him in the inner depths of the well. Al-Jub. This is significant because it tells us that the brothers of Yusuf alayhi salam knew about this well. They knew about it, and in suggesting it to them, he didn't have to explain which well it was. They knew, which means that they knew where it was, they knew its qualities, and they knew that that was the likeliest place for him to be placed, where he would A, survive, and B, be found. So we understand further from that they know not only the well's location, but they also know that the well is so primitive that it doesn't even have a lot of water, because if it had a full amount of water flowing upwards, Yusuf would have drowned. That would have been murder. So they know that if they put him in this well, it's such a little amount of water at the bottom that he would still be safe. He would not die. He would not drown as a result. So they say jub in the sense of a well that they recognized. So what's the nature of the well, and where was it? Well, you find those details also in the books of Tafsir. And again, these are narrations, and they don't really afford us a high degree of certainty. They're more curiosities for us. So you have the narration of Qatada, who says that it was a well on one of the travel routes, on the route to Jerusalem. You have the position of Wahab ibn Munabbih, who was a convert to Islam, who had knowledge of the scriptures, and he said that it was in the Jordan River Valley, so a little further east. And then you have the position of Muqatil, who said that it was 3 farasikh from Yaqub's house. What's a farasikh? Is 3 farsakhs. Add the English S. A farsakh is a unit of measurement, and 1 farsakh is more or less 5 kilometers. So 3 farasikh is about 15 kilometers, or about 11, 12 miles, give or take. So this is far enough where they could put him in it and they could get home and it wouldn't be nearby, nor is it, but it's not so far away that it would take too long for them to go out and come back. So Allah knows best where it was and how far it was from the home, but it was a known primitive well on one of the travel routes frequented by different caravans. And that's why they knew, that's why he said, place him in the inner depths of the well. يَلْتَقِطْهُ بَعْضُ السَّيَّارَةِ. He will be found as lost property by some caravan. They knew that a caravan would at some point pass by. Not only some point, but relatively soon. So there's some frequency going on, obviously. If they felt that only one caravan's coming every few days, they probably wouldn't have done it, because he would have died of dehydration or died of starvation or some of the elements. So they knew that chances are there's a lot of caravans going by, and they're going to stop here for water, and they're going to reach in for getting the water and discover Yusuf alayhi salam. This is no man's land as well. Someone may ask, how is it that random people can be in a caravan traveling in this relative no man's land? Not to say that there's no human life in the area, but it's no man's land in that it's not really governed. And if there's any governance, it's in the cities and in the rural areas where there's still populations, villages. This is a no man's land in that there's no real rule of law. And the way it was for human civilization up until recently, no man's land is basically no man's land. It's the ghaba, anything goes. It's, when I was crossing, when living in Morocco, we would go to this place called Melilla. Melilla is a Spanish territory in Morocco. Spain has two territories in Morocco that is Spanish territory, but it's on Moroccan soil. They never gave them back, and that's Melilla and Ceuta. So when you go to Melilla, it's an easy way to go and come back if you want to just renew your visa and game the system, basically. But you visit there, and when you cross that border, that land border, you go through, of course, the immigration side on Morocco, getting the exit visa, and then you go to the Spanish side. But in between those two places, there's this double-sided fence, and this area you have to walk through. And they say this is the no man's land. It technically doesn't belong to either Morocco or Spain. It's just a transfer point between the two places. Technically, if someone was to get jammed up and hurt or assaulted there, neither side would prosecute or would have the ability to prosecute. It's not on either of their soil. I don't know how that would look in real life, but that was the norm in the so-called no man's land of various parts of the world. And that's how it is that someone could find a boy in the well and just say, oh well, he's ours now.
Free for all.
Free for all. We're going to take him and sell him. So, going back here, he objected, the brother here who suggested this, he objected to killing Yusuf alayhi salam. He understood that this well was not filled with water, so he wouldn't die. And we know it's not a random well. And we also know that it was frequented by travelers, by caravans. And they were reasonably sure that by putting him in this well, he would be far from home, far enough to where he wouldn't be able to get back, be safe, he wouldn't die because it's not filled with water all the way. C, it's frequented by travelers who are on their way to another area, and that he would be seen. We can also understand from this that they knew the caravan route was not intersecting or coming near to any trails or paths leading to Yaqub's house. How do we know that? We know that because if it was leading onto a road going near his house, presumably Yusuf could have been taken out of the well and he would have been on the caravan with them, passing by familiar landmarks and knowing exactly where he's at. And he could have made a protest, made a dash, made an escape, whatever. But when you're going in the middle of nowhere that you don't recognize, to escape is to escape to death because there's nothing else. We can also understand from this, this is kind of an answer to the question, why didn't the brothers just take him and wait for a caravan and give him away or sell him and make a little money out of the deal? Because likely Yusuf would have protested and would have said something. But by putting him in the well by himself and leaving him like that in that circumstance, when he's found and taken in the no man's land, there's nothing he can really do, because even if he protests, they're going in the other direction. He doesn't know where he's at. There's no way he could survive in that no man's land environment, even if he managed to escape. So he's taken, and that's his circumstance. And this is how the story unfolds. So,
why didn't he struggle?
Why didn't he struggle? Well, we understand he's also very young from this story, because when we look at the plot and how they managed to convince their father Yaqub to permit them to take him, we gather that he was very young. A 7-year-old. What can a 7-year-old do if he's taken by a group of men in a caravan to a faraway land?
I'm saying the struggle of being put into the well.
He's 7 years old. And there's a group of 11 brothers. And they're an usba. They're strong. Right? So at the end, and we'll get to your question inshallah, at the end of this suggestion, when he says, don't kill him, but put him in the inner depths of the well so that he'll be found by some caravan, he said at the end, in kuntum fa'ilin. In kuntum fa'ilin would be translated as if you're going to do it. If you're going to do it. But what does that mean? When we look in the Tafsir, we see that there's a common opinion and then there's a secondary opinion about what is actually being communicated when he says, if you're going to do it. We find one view that says that it's kind of an emphasis. It's a way of him emphasizing, encouraging them, even urging them to take this course of action and not the other. Therefore, we see the option of murder or the option of exiling him. And he's saying, don't murder him, don't kill him, but do this instead, insisting, emphasizing that this is the right course of action to take. This is one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is that it's a subtle form of disapproval, a subtle way of telling them that we really shouldn't do this. But if there's no recourse but to do something along these lines, then between the two, let's not kill him, let's do this, at least, the lesser of two evils. But it's better if we don't do it. In kuntum fa'ilin, i.e., if you must, then let it be this and not option A, killing him. This is the one way of reading it. So he's appealing to the rest of the brothers to take the lesser of the two evils. And this is one way you could read that as well. And this is how the majority tend to interpret it. It's if they're saying that he gives this suggestion and it's his way of saying that, listen, I'm outnumbered here, so it's better that we don't do this at all. But if you all insist and it's going to happen, then let it be this option and not the first option, because that's worse. This is how it's understood. So you had a question?
You were talking about location.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say in some tafsirs they mentioned that it was a commercial route of caravans that used to travel via Palestine. And one of the things about Palestine at that time it was they were overpopulated with wolves.
Mm.
So I just wanted to share that with
That's interesting. Thank you. So this is ayah 10. Now they've hatched the plot. First came the suggestion of murder, then exiling him as an option with the intention of winning over their father and getting his love. Then the sayer among them says, no, don't do that. Let's put him in a well so that he'll be found by some caravan. If you're going to do it, do this. The plot has been hatched. The story now shifts. There's again this iltifat, where we go from the conversation among the brothers, which was not within earshot of the father, to the part where they're presenting themselves to their father and trying to get his permission. So there's a gap here, and we understand from the gap that they agreed to this plot. They agreed that they would try to get Yusuf out there, far out, take him out to the well, put him inside, and get back. In this way, they could be rid of their brother and win their father's love. So we go to Ayah 11 with them hatching this plot and trying to get the permission of the father. They say, قالوا يا أبانا ما لك تأممنا على يوسف وإنا له لناصحون. They said, O our father, why do you not trust us with Yusuf? Why do you not give us Yusuf in trust? That's another way. Indeed, we are nasihun. We are well-wishers for him. This ayah has a lot. First and foremost, they go to their father and they address him with terms of endearment. They don't say the equivalent of the English dad. They say, dear father, oh beloved father. They address him with terms of endearment to show their love. They're trying to win him over. As we say in the West, when the child is trying to get their way, they're trying to butter them up. Butter you up. So they say, Ya Abana, Malak, what is the matter with you? What is the problem with you that you do not trust us with Yusuf? Inna lahu lanasihun. Wa inna lahu lanasihun. So they say to him, verily, we are indeed, certainly, nasihun. There's a triple emphasis here, right? So, just go back a little bit. They address him with terms of endearment. Dear father, they say, what is wrong with you that you do not trust us with Yusuf? What does that tell you right there? That tells you that they already know and have experienced his distrust of them in caring for Yusuf. There's already indications, there's already a history of sibling rivalry, of tension. That's why Yaqub told Yusuf alayhi salam, لا تقصص رؤياك على إخوتك. Do not tell your brothers your dream. There's already a tension there. So he is aware of the tension. He is suspicious of them from the beginning, out the gate. So when they want to hatch the plot, they can't just say, let us take him. They have to guilt trip him. And this is very familiar with parents. The children who want to get their way, they don't always come straight out and say, let me have this or that. Especially when there's a history of them not getting it. Instead, they try to guilt trip the parent. It's the strategy of children. So they try to guilt trip Yaqub to get their way. And they say, what is wrong with you? What is the matter that you do not trust us with Yusuf? وَإِنَّا لَهُ لَنَاصِحُونَ. They say, and verily, surely we are nasihun for him. This doesn't come out in English. So remember last class, we talked about emphasis in Arabic and the function of it. We said that inna, for instance, verily, as an emphasis is usually when there's some doubt, when there's some hesitancy. It doesn't always have to be that way, but that's usually the case. For instance, if you say, Ja'a Zaydun, Zayd came, and the person was doubting whether he truly came or not, you would confirm Zayd having come by saying, Inna Zaydan Ja'a. Verily Zayd came. You're saying that emphasis in response to a preceding doubt. So the greater the doubt, the greater the emphasis. Here, there's 3 levels of emphasis. Inna, verily, surely. Then the lam of tawkid, the lam of emphasis, right? And then the taqdeem and ta'khir, the forwarding and delay in the Arabic. This doesn't come out in English. But in the original Arabic order, it would be inna nasihuna lahu. It would be nasihun, the noun, followed by the preposition. Here is the preposition followed by the noun. Their forwarding and delay is used for emphasis in Arabic too. So they say inna lahu nasihun. If we translated this in a very stilted and artificial way to give you a sense of what it means in Arabic, or a sense of the intensity, it would be like us saying, verily, we are most definitely, without doubt, nasihun for him, meaning well-wishers, desiring good for him, looking out for his best interest. It sounds very artificial and stilted in English, but in Arabic it is very powerful. It is a way of addressing prior suspicions and doubts. So they say here that they have the quality of nasiha for Yusuf alayhi salam. And we see in the next verse they mention another quality they have, which is hifz. And we have to juxtapose these two. The first thing they say is, we are nasihun for Yusuf alayhi salam. And we translate that as well-wishers, wishing good, desiring his what is best for him, and so on. And this is nasiha. Linguistically, nasiha comes from nasaha. And in Arabic, it has two primary meanings. It can mean to clean or to purify, to remove something that is dirty or impure for something. When you say nasuha al-laban, it's when you remove something impure from the milk. It is used in the sense of purifying something that could go bad. Milk, honey, any like a dairy product. So nasiha is that act of purifying something from debris. The second meaning is to unite or gather something that's scattered. You could say nasaha with reference to sewing a garment, because you're putting two pieces together to make it whole. So the idea of wholeness, of soundness, of keeping something free from impurities, defilement. This is the general linguistic meaning of nasiha. In the context here, it is sincerity in desiring good for someone. And this is why the Prophet ﷺ says, ad-deenun nasiha, the deen is nasiha. Some say sound advice. Sound advice or sincere advice is nasiha, but it's not the only kind of nasiha. The nasiha to Allah, to His Messenger, to the book, to His book, to the imams of the Muslims and the general body of the Muslims, as it mentions in the hadith. There is nasiha on different levels. Here, what they're saying is nasiha as a state of their inner purity. They're talking about their own state, saying that we are inwardly well-wishers. Inwardly, we love our brother. Inwardly, we want what's good for him. And because of that deep-seated love and desire for good, we will look after him. So they are describing their inward state, saying, verily we are nasihun, we are well-wishers. That's our state. So how are we going to neglect him? How are we going to let him get hurt if we go out? So the lesson here, the general moral lesson we get from this part, here the brothers have already hatched the plot. They've discussed the details, and though it's not mentioned, we understand that they've spoken among themselves about how they're going to get the permission and what they have to say and how they have to present themselves. They go to the father, Yaqub alayhi salam, and they guilt trip him. And then after guilt tripping him, they say, we desire good for Yusuf. We desire what is best. In the general moral lesson here, because did they want what is best? No, not at all. The moral lesson here is not everyone who says they have your best interest at heart is actually sincere in their claim. Their intentions are not always what they state their intentions to be. So we can't just pay attention to what people say, we have to pay attention to what they do. And we can't just pay attention to what they say in one moment while ignoring track records. Yaqub alayhi salam has seen the track record. And then we get to the question, if he has a track record, why did he let them go with Yusuf alayhi salam? We'll get to that inshaAllah. But they're not done. They're still trying to convince the father Yaqub alayhi salam to let them take Yusuf. So they say, أرسله معنا غدا يرتع ويلعب وإنا له لحافظون. They continue trying to convince their father, and after saying that they have sincere desire for his well-being, they say, send him with us غدا. I'll leave that untranslated. Send him with us غدا. He will play and enjoy himself. We will most definitely be guardians for him, protectors from him. So this verse is structured very similar to the previous verse. In the previous verse, they end by saying, وَإِنَّا لَهُ لَنَاصِحُونَ. And here they say, وَإِنَّا لَهُ لَحَافِظُونَ. It's the same structure of emphasis. Verily, most surely, we are for him حافظون, protecting him. This is speaking about their outward capabilities, the capabilities of them protecting Yusuf alayhi salam, physically speaking. So after seeking to reassure Yaqub that they're worthy of taking Yusuf, they now put forward the request in the specific sense of saying, send him with us. Send him with us. They already said they desire good. Now they're saying that we can also protect him physically from any danger or harm. So they say, send him with us when? It says ghadan. And a lot of the translations of Surah Yusuf in English say, send him with us tomorrow. But that's not entirely accurate. Some of them say, send him with us tomorrow morning. And that's more accurate, but still not 100%. We have to look at the meaning of ghadan for a few reasons. So what does ghadan mean? In Arabic, ghadan comes from ghadwa, which is the early morning time. And it's defined as that period between subh and fajr, or fajr and subh. You know, in the Maliki school, the 2 rak'ahs of sunnah are called fajr. So in the Maliki school, to pray fajr is to pray the 2 rak'ahs of sunnah. To pray the obligatory prayer is to pray subh. But they can be used interchangeably. Subh and fajr, or fajr and subh. That time is basically the early period when fajr enters, and then the ideal period of the early morning. So you have the idea of early morning, not the latest part of the night, and not sunrise. It's the stretch of time from the earliest time when fajr begins to the ideal time of fajr, but before sunrise. That is the technical definition of ghadan. So when you say ghadan in everyday Arabic now, it just means tomorrow. But the technical meaning is tomorrow morning, or morning, early morning time. The tomorrow morning is the meaning that we associate it with, but we don't want to say it's literally tomorrow morning. It's literally send him with us in an early morning time. Why is it ambiguous like this? It's for a very good reason. If they had said, send him with us tomorrow, there's a very good chance Yaqub would have said no. It's too open. If they said, send him with us tomorrow morning, it's too narrow, and he could have easily said no. But by saying ghadan, if we understand ghadan to mean an open-ended early morning, it would mean that they're saying, send him with us in an early morning time, but without specifying it as tomorrow morning or the morning after. So we understand from this that from the depth of the Arabic, that they're not leaving it so open-ended to say, let him go with us, to give Yaqub a reason to say no. But by the same token, they're not being so narrow as to say tomorrow morning immediately, as that might have aroused suspicion. We can gather from this that the brothers are saying to the father, allow Yusuf or send Yusuf with us to go in an early morning time, without specifying whether it's the next day or the day after. And the reason, the ulama mentioned, the reason why they said the early morning time and not another time is because it was likely summer when they put this request forward. And if you've ever lived in a very hot climate, a desert country, a very arid climate, you know that in the summertime, Fajr time and post-Fajr time is the very best time to go out and do things. Because the environment, it's a lot cooler. It's not cold, but it's cool and refreshing. The sun is not out and beaming. And depending on where you are in the world, when it's a dry, desert, arid climate, in the summer at that, you have about a 3-hour window, 4-hour window to go out and do things when it's still cool before it gets too hot. When I was in Mauritania, and it wasn't even summertime, around this time of year, fall and winter, Fajr time was the only bearable time to be outside besides, say, 5:30, 6 o'clock in the evening. But at Fajr time, you'd have the time of Fajr until about 9:30 in the morning to be outside to do anything and enjoy yourself. Because at around 9:45 or 10, the sun is up so high that it's unbearably hot. So we understand that it was in the summertime, and they're putting the request to the father to go in the early morning because that will be a time to go out and play and have fun before it gets too hot. If they had said, let him go out in the middle of the day, he wouldn't have allowed them. So going in the morning, it's because that was a cool time of day, and that will be the time they will go out and relax. So what they say, because the pretext is, let him go with us so he can do two things, yarta' wa yal'ab. Yarta' is literally to graze. To graze. That's the original meaning of yarta' in Arabic. To graze an animal. When an animal is grazing, it's yarta'. It's yarta'ing, to use English and Arabic. But that's the original meaning, but it then became used for human beings as a metonym for relaxing, chilling, and enjoying oneself, frolicking, just having a fun time. So when a person is engaging in this act, we say fulan yarta', it means they're going around relaxing, chilling, picnicking, just relaxing and having a nice time. And the Prophet ﷺ also uses this word in the hadith about the gatherings of dhikr. He says, when you pass by a garden from the gardens of paradise, farta'u, he says, farta'u, frolic therein. Frolicking in the sense of enjoying yourself and relaxing and gaining and benefiting from that gathering. So yarta' is to relax. And then they say, وَيَلْعَبْ, and to play. And to play. So playing is, what's interesting here is, in the books of Tafsir, when they talk about the difference between yarta' and yal'ab, they explain yarta' linguistically, how it was used for animals and then was applied to humans. And when they talk about play, they define the term and go into the fiqh of playing. What is the legal ruling on playing? And what is the difference between la'ab, that is permissible, and la'ab, that is impermissible, and lahu, frivolous pastimes that are condemned in the Quran. And they say that la'ab, lawful play, is any permissible pastime that lightens the soul and brings lightness to the ruh, and which does not crowd out or interfere with obligations or higher priorities. So if it interferes with something wajib, it becomes unlawful play. For instance, let's say you're out playing soccer or basketball and it's Maghrib time. If you continue playing through Maghrib, what was earlier permissible play has now become impermissible play. Not because of the act itself, but because it's crowding out something that is wajib in that moment. If it's not in, then it's permissible play, provided there's no other impermissible activities going on in conjunction with it. Betting or behaviors that stem from the act. Anyhow, they talk about play like this. But there's a general play that is completely permissible and indeed a part of human nature that is needed by human beings. And we see in the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ that he would engage in la'ib, he would engage in playful activity, he would race with Sayyida Aisha radiallahu anha, and this is encouraged. We see that he would play with Sayyidina Hassan and Hussein alayhimus salam. This is permissible. So they're asking about permissible forms of play, to take Yusuf out in the early morning when it's still comfortably cool, to relax, to go around here and there and play. And they're saying that we will supervise him because we have two qualities. Number one, we have in our hearts a sincere desire for his best interest. We're nasihun. And number two, as an usba, a group, we're hafidhun, we're strong. We can protect him from external threats. We can look after him. We can safeguard him. So, from the structure of the plot among the brothers and how they pitch the idea to the father, we do gather that they were very familiar with the area. And indeed, in the Tafsir books, they mentioned that this area they wanted to go to, where the well is located, was an area they frequented because they took their animals there when they grazed them. When they were herding the animals, grazing the livestock, they were going in this area that they were going to take Yusuf to. So we understand that it's a familiar place to them. Their father also knows of this place because they're taking the livestock out there. And they're telling the father, let us take him. We're going to go early in the morning and just have some fun and relax. And it'll be fine because, hey, we have his best interest at heart. We care for him. And we're also strong. We'll look after him. Nothing to worry about. So they plotted amongst themselves. They changed course and decided against killing him. They tried to convince the father, first by guilt-tripping him. First, by buttering him up, saying, dear father. Second, by guilt-tripping him. Thirdly, by speaking of qualities they didn't have, saying that they were nasihun, and then saying that they would protect him. And they had the ability to do that, but they betrayed him. They didn't protect him. They harmed him. And they tried to use this triple emphasis, this emphatic language, to get their father to allow him to go, Yusuf alayhi salam, to go with the brothers. So next week we have to explore a bit about Yaqub's feelings early on, his lingering suspicions, why he allowed them to go, and then we look at what happens after he's left by himself, what's going on in the well, what is he receiving in the well, what happens when he's discovered, and that journey onto the second stage of the story when the brothers are out of the picture and it's Yusuf in a foreign land. Insha'Allah ta'ala. والحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. نعم.
A couple questions here. So, in the beginning, Yaqub says, don't tell your dream to your brothers, فَيَكِيدُ لَكَ كَيْدًا, because then they will, if you say it to them, they're going to plot a big plotting. Is there anything that says that, okay, what is the time frame between that dream, do we know, and the actual plot? And is it possible, I'm not saying it is, I'm just curious, that somehow word leaked to them because they ended up plotting anyway?
Mm-hmm. What I've come across among the Mufassirun is that he didn't share the details of the dream. He obeyed his father in keeping that to himself. But there was still the jealousy because of the way he was treated and the love shown to him over the other brothers. So what has been suggested is that they still carried out this kind of plot. Had he communicated the details of the dream, one, they would have quickly understood what it meant. They would have put two and two together, looking at the symbolism of the dream, right? 11 stars, sun and moon, prostrating. And if they were aware of this dream, they would have done far worse than put him in the well. They would have killed him.
So by being his father, he may have avoided that murder aspect.
Yes.
Well, they were also his cousin and their half-brother.
Yeah.
Because their mother was Rachel. Is that correct?
Right.
And their mother, some of their mothers, a couple of mothers, was Leah. And Leah and Rachel were sisters.
Right.
And at the beginning of the marriage, Rachel couldn't have children.
Right.
And that's why Leah came into play.
Right.
To have the babies. So there was a little bit of animosity there.
Yeah, it's interesting that the Quranic narrative doesn't tell that backstory.
But he loved Rachel. He really was in love with Rachel.
Mm-hmm.
And that was Yusuf's and Benjamin's mom
Mm-hmm.
that had passed. And she really wasn't supposed to have children. And she had children anyway.
Yep. Another question?
I was thinking about ayah 9. Could it be the whispering of shaitan? Because the mir lakum is used here.
Ayah 9.
Uqtulu Yusufa aw itrahuhu.
يَخْلُو لَكُمْ وَجْهُ أَبِيكُمْ. So in Ayah 9,
I was just thinking, was it the whispering of shaitan maybe?
because of what reason?
Lakum is used. The mir.
اقتلوا يوسف واطرحوه أرضا يخلو لكم وجه أبيكم.
Yeah.
Now this is lazim. It's not. It's not a muta'addi verb.
No. Abikum. I mean, instead of using abina, it's used abikum here.
Well, this is the suggestion. It says uqtulu Yusuf. So this is addressing them as a group. So you're asking who's speaking here?
Who is speaking?
Was it the whispering of shaitan? This is one of the brothers suggesting to the rest of the brothers that this is what they should do. And it doesn't specify who it is. Right. So uqtulu is...
Why didn't he say abina instead of saying abikum?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, one can reflect why he didn't say our father and said your father instead. I haven't seen anything, but it's probably something that someone's explored. Wallahu a'lam.
In the next class, you will also, then you will explain why Yaqub alayhi salam is still willing to send Yusuf alayhi salam, although there is some history of which make him not to send.
Mm-hmm.
There were some things
Mm-hmm.
which is a record in history, right?
Right.
In the next class you will tell.
Yeah, well, we have to talk about this because this is a very common issue that we struggle with as people. We want to have good opinions about people, and sometimes the good opinion we try to maintain conflicts with our gut feelings in the situation. So what do? Do you go with a gut feeling, or do you ignore that feeling and maintain the good opinion and move forward? And we have to talk about firasa as well. We have to speak about the intuition and these feelings we get about people. Something, we read them in a certain way and something is off. Do we trust that instinct, or do we say, no, that's just me thinking badly about people, being overly suspicious, or it's the whisperings of shaitan? There is this balance that has to be maintained, and we have to have that conversation and look at that. There is this firasa, and then there is how we act on that firasa. So that's where we want to go in that conversation, because we do see that he was suspicious, and that there's a track record with these brothers, yet he allows them, right? So why is that, and what does that teach us, and how do we balance between having a good opinion of people and dealing with the gut instinct? Do we treat the gut instinct as just shaitan or nafs, or do we pay attention to it? And how do we know if it's from genuine firasa or just a nafsani, egotistical suspicion because of whatever reason? It's something you have to tackle as a human being, right? Because you'll find that you can't say always, but quite frequently, when you ignore the gut feeling, you find that it was actually right. So how do you balance? That we'll talk about that next week, inshallah. And look at the issue of husn al-dhann in general, and firasa, this intuition that the believer gets, and how to distinguish between true intuition and illegitimate suspicion, inshallah.
I'm guessing you're probably going to go into why Yaqub alayhi salam, he mentioned the wolf, and they ran with that idea.
Yeah.
Why would he specifically mention that? And then, I know you're going to get to it.
Yeah.
But that's an interesting point, I think.
If you want to remind people about the class.
The Ashketon class, yes. Inshallah, Friday night after Isha, starting this week, we have the new class, Navigating the Ashketon. It's an interesting title. People are scratching their heads wondering what in the world is Ashketon. Well, that was done on purpose. It's about the signs of the last day. But it's going to be very different from any kind of class that typically covers the signs. And I'm not going to say why, but you'll find out. All I'll say is that people commonly look at the last day and the signs of the last day from a timeline starting now, moving forward. But the navigating the Ashketon is navigating the map and finding out where you are on the map. The maps in the mall, you are here. Where are we in the greater map of the signs of the last day? Are we at the beginning waiting for them, or are we right in the middle? Or are we here? And in order to do that, you have to go backwards as well. So I'll leave it at that, inshallah.